In the second place, we have Donato Gagliastro, who is PhD student at Prague. His research interest focuses on the reception of classicists in late Middle Ages and modern literature, encompassing linguistic, philological, and literary aspects. He has dealt mainly with Ovidian reception of Gabriele d'Annunzio, and this is exactly what he will forthwith talking about. Thank you.
Buenos días a todos. En primer lugar, me parece justo agradecer a los profesores de esta prestigiosa universidad, entre otros, profesor David Hernández de la Fuente, Miguel Herrero de Quaregui, Anna Moure y Pere Fábregas Salis, para organizar esta importante edición del Europeo, porque estamos recuperando el compartir del mismo espacio como lugar para el desarrollo dialéctico del conocimiento. Una vez más, gracias. And thank you, Professor Bielawski, for your wonderful Lectio Magistralis. I shall start with the... How can I scroll down? Well, if it's possible to scroll down and move. Okay. I would like to start with this definition. Ovid's modern brother. This is how Ettore Paratore once defined Gabriele d'Annunzio in a well-known essay back in the 60s, because I believe that in a comparative approach and analysis between D'Annunzio and Ovid, the commonality of origin is a factor of primary interest. In Le Faville del Maglio, D'Annunzio reveals that since his early years at Cicognini schools, he feels bounded with Ovid by a relationship of consanguinity, per essere nato nella medesima terra irrigua, for having been born in the same irrigated land. And like Ovid, D'Annunzio is also Paedignis natus aquosis from the hexameter of the second book of Amores. The homeland is a referent recalled by both, not only birth, but first principle and essential foundation. During these years at the Cicognini school, D'Annunzio proves to be an eager reader of Ovid, to the point that in a letter to his mother found a few years ago, he manifests to her his intention to try his hand at translating in full the Metamorphosis. And also when the 18-year-old Gabriele left the province to arrive in Rome to enroll at the university, he found himself before a city, Roma, that was undergoing a transformation in metropolitan sense. Roma saw the constructions, among the others, of Prati district, Via Nazionale, Via Veneto, Capitolium. And on the basis of a comparison between these two biographies, temporarily divided by great distance, the first entry into Rome of D'Annunzio from the province seems to show some analogy with Ovid, who came to Rome, as you know, to study rhetorics. And apart from the undeniable differences between these two inaugural moments, the post-unification transformation of Rome appears to be generically comparable to that experienced by Ovid's Golden Rome in the Augustan era. The urbe which displayed the riches of domination to the conquered world, and shown with the capital, the curia, and aroused the wonder of the young Ovid, proud to have been born in the era pacified by Augustus, gratulor aequetas, moribus apta meis, as he said in Ars Book 3. And in Rome, the capital of a new and united Italy, the young D'Annunzio, a pretty lazy provincial student, eager to make a rapid social ascent, left the university classrooms to attend the newsrooms, and at 21, from the column of the Tribuna, he completed his literary apprenticeship by writing columns on the Grand Monde. At first, he found this task unbearable. It seems to him that he was wasting his talent, that he would have employed in composing literary masterpiece. But the years to come show that his debut as a journalist would be of fundamental importance for his literary success. And many texts of D'Annunzio's columns would in fact be included in the first Roman novel, Il Piacere, Pleasure, that is hugely influenced by the milieu of ars amatoria. And he set himself the task of satisfying what he called, in the words of an article published in 1892 on Il Mattino, Il bisogno del sogno, la necesidad del sueño, the need to dream, inherent in the vast public of users of the novel as a literary product for mass consumption. And a follower and creator of fashion, D'Annunzio showed himself to be very capable of pandering the taste of female public. A forerunner of contemporary cultural products, he also saw in the new silent film industry not an invention that threatened to replace literature, as some pedants feared, but a form of visual art that has in Ovid a millenary antecedent. For D'Annunzio, the Metamorphoses are cinematographic, that preluded in germ an aesthetics of movement. So D'Annunzio is an author consecrated to success by the mass audience, and in relation to Ovid, in Alessandro Barchesi's words, no other Latin poet is so clear and firm in outlining the project of a horizontal public as an absolute arbiter of success. And similarly, Ovid's literary beginnings delineate a privileged relationship with the youth audience, also connoted in a feminine sense. And in this regard, Sharon Lynn James observes that elegy overtly identifies its anticipation of women readers. And in the elegy of Book 2 of the Amores, he presents himself as a creator of love poetry, ille ego nequitie naso poete me. And so both the authors, Ovid and D'Annunzio, consecrated themselves as authors capable of capturing and satisfying the expectation of new readers. Ovid's readers came into being with the extension of education to middle classes in an age in which, as Pecere, in an essay of 1996, says that the fences that enclose high literature and its users could not withstand the impetuous thrust of spread of literacy. So a cultured public of young men and women readers, no longer limited to hegemonic classes of senatorial aristocracy, not vulgus, but media plebs. And Doctae Puelle was an important part of this variegated reading public. And also, they gave a decisive impulse of this reception. In a well-known verse of the third book of the Ars, in relation to the Heroides, Ovid proudly proclaims the creation of new genre, ignotoc ali sille novavit opus. And for authors such Ovid and D'Annunzio, inclined to satisfy the average audience need for the dream of common existence, this theatrical overabundance that we can appreciate reading the Heroides form a confession-type narrative structures that also reveals the subjectivity of heroines and the autonomy of their literary existence. And on the basis of such subjectivity, the heroines offer models for D'Annunzio-style literary character, and there is a correspondence that we can establish between also the ancient reader of Heroides and the reader of D'Annunzio. As we said, D'Annunzio articles transcend the confines of the newspaper page and spill over into many parts of Il Piacere, largely influenced by the Ars, because the journalistic material formed the description of Roman social environment made up of exquisite urbanity, sumptuous receptions, horseback riding, themes that of Roman life that have a parallel with a refinement of the places. I'm talking to you readers of Ars Amatoria, described by Ovid in the first book. Perhaps you remember his descriptions of porticos, the forum, the theater, the horse races at the Circus Maximum, the gladiatorial games, and so on. These places present themselves as favorable places for gallant meetings, so that the buildings of Rome do not, in Ovid's elegy, represent the heroic deeds, but come instead to act as a landmark in the city of love, as Rebecca Armstrong pointed out in 2005. So in this context of desacralized urban emblems, also the cultus is a taste for refinement, is a pleasure appropriate to the times, the zeitgeist of the new happy golden age, in Rosati's words. So in pleasure, il piacere, the monumental landscape of Rome is constantly recalled and described, but it does not act as an ornamental backdrop. On the very contrary, it's closely linked to Andrea Sperelli, the protagonist, psychology, and accords with his intellectual condition. The mechanism of the novel, there could be much to say about it, attributes a decisive value to the place, similar to what we have seen regarding the Ars. Among the many examples, I select this passage. It's a description taken from the pleasure that summarize the attributes that form the power to acquire the soul of women of Andrea Sperelli. The Italian version is: egli sapeva trarre dalla sua bellezza il maggior possibile godimento. And the reason, the basis of his power lay in this, that in the art of love, he says this in Italian, in Ars Amandi, D'Annunzio says, he had no repugnance for any pretense, for any falseness. Isn't it the description of the dives amator outlined in the lines of Ars Amatoria? Moving to another novel of D'Annunzio, Il Fuoco, translate variously as the flame of the fire, another Ovidian heroine stands out. It's Foscarina, a celebrated actress, a sorrowful woman, desperate and nomadic, just as Andreas Perelli is considered to be D'Annunzio's fictional stand-in, Foscarina is that of Eleonora Duse, arguably the greatest actress of her time, with whom D'Annunzio had a sentimental liaison. And Foscarina appears fragile and languid in the memory of the past splendor of her beauty and the youthful body, exhausted by the struggle to affirm the perenniality of art against death. And in her we can find similar traits to Ovid's Ariadne. For example, in the monologue, there is one monologue pronounced by Foscarina towards the end of the novel, and echoes the voice of Ariadne, the nomadic and unhappy heroine who wanders solitary like an invaded Bacchante, autego erravit qualis Baccha, whose pain is accentuated by the theatricality of her gesture. And Foscarina likewise knows the experience of pain just like Ariadne, and she recalled the significant moment of her public and private life. I will go a little bit further, and I want to try to attract your attention to Alcyone, that was defined like the modern metamorphosis. And it's in Alcyone that we can best understand how much Ovid is assimilated, transformed, and regenerated by D'Annunzio. Alcyone is not only a work that celebrates the happiness of a marine summer, it's a journey into Ovid's myth, heralded by the dying spring of the Sera Fiesolana, exploding in summer and ending in the melancholy of autumn. And the most recent commentary on Alcyone has shown that Ovid ranks first among Latin authors in terms of the number of references and quotations, whereas Dante is the most cited author among the Italians, but with a decisive difference in my opinion. Why the references to Dante are literal and superficial, those to Ovid demonstrate a spiritual and essential harmony with him. So Alcyone, for those who do not know, it reflects a state of Edenic grace conquered in a dreamy time of a summer holiday. And the lexicon itself feeds on many Latinisms drawn from the Metamorphosis vocabulary. Some poems, such as dithyrambs, are preceded by others with Ovidian title, Terra vale stabat nuda estas, altius egit iter, and run parallel to the myths of the Metamorphosis, in particular that of Glaucus and Icarus. D'Annunzio imprint a personal seal, and more importantly, he who is kind of adept at making use of other authors' expressions, hidden and concealed in the text. In the case of Ovid, he showcased them almost proudly. I will show you some parallel analysis very quickly. Here we are. All the quotes are drawn from Dithyramb 1, as opposed to quotations from mostly the Metamorphosis books 14 and 15. So in the first example, Ovid's reminiscence expressed the desire to retrace the place touched by Ulysses and Aeneas, Lugne adorne di lampi sull'aride ariste. These verses are reminiscent of Midas plucking the dry ears of corn. Arentes cereris decerpsit aristas. Or Daricia la selva serena, in the following example, the verse refers to Metamorphosis 15. Egeria hiding in the woods of the valley of Aricia, vallis Aricinae densis late dabdita silvis. Ad arde ad Anaia ovarde il sangue di Turno, corresponds to Turnusque cadit arde a Turnos ospite. And nutrice Eneia is a periphrasis to recall the Gulf of Gaeta, which took its name from Caieta, Aeneas' nurse, is specular to Eneia Nutrix. And we can quickly continue with Letifera come il veleno il carme dell'avida maga, retakes unc dea previtiat portentificisque venenis, or Circe, Idia callida figlia del sole, is so defined in the same identical position at the end of the verse, en ego cum dea simnitidi cum filia solis, Circe's speech to Glaucus at the beginning of book 14, who had arrived at the palace of the daughter of the sun. I shall come to the conclusion. So much there is to say. Just a few glimpses to the later works of D'Annunzio in parallel with those of Ovid that yesterday we were talking about, thanks to Anna's interesting presentation. That, in the works of the Twilight, both Ovid and D'Annunzio lean towards the shadow. Both of them are distant from their beloved Rome without ever returning. Both live isolated and reclusive. Ovid, as we know, in Tomis, D'Annunzio before the Garda lake in his Vittoriale. The Tristia are elegies of solitude that resonate with the lament of a banished voice. And Paolo Fedeli, a fine scholar of Ovid, recalls D'Annunzio's remark on the Tristia, which contrasted with the official critics at the time when Ovid's production of the Exile in the 20s of the past century had been neglected or dismissed because it was considered unworthy of belonging to inspired literature as a faded exercise of once great gifts. This is a judgment of D'Annunzio recalled by Fedeli. And D'Annunzio declares his preference for the Tristia. Ero attratto dal suo crudo esilio, I shall translate. I was attracted by the anguish of the voluptuous heart filled with memories under the great wind of Scythia. Essentially, the memorial retreat that replaced the protagonism, the first-person narrative, with a diary-like prose that runs through many stylistically similar writings, is sublimated into an uninterrupted diary. So essentially, we watch, like melancholically, the humor of the Tristia, that it's an ideal complement and reverse of the joyful sensuality of the Amores, and this finds a correspondence in D'Annunzio Contemplazione della Morte, Notturno, and many other letters imbued with spleen that can be in turn equated with the also Epistolae ex Ponto. I shall stop here. I would like in the end to thank once again the colloquium, Susan Heinrich, Dimitar Bechev, and if I'm allowed, I would like to thank Valeria, Te prius optavi quam mihi nota fores. Thank you very much for your kind attention.